The auction house smelled like money, not the kind of money that comes in worn-down wallets or crumpled in jacket pockets, the kind that settles into leather chairs and polished floors and stays there, invisible and certain, the way cold stays in stone walls even after the sun has been shining for hours, the kind that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to, the kind that simply is, the way gravity is. Hartwell and Sons' premier canine estates occupied a converted carriage house on the north edge of Glenbrook, a suburb 40 minutes outside Chicago, where the average home had 4 garages and the school fundraisers cleared 6 figures. The building had been renovated twice in 10 years, exposed brick on the interior walls now, and track lighting that cast everything in a warm amber meant to suggest warmth without offering any. The original carriage doors had been kept, painted a dark slate blue, and were propped open with wrought iron holders, shaped like dog silhouettes. A small brass plaque beside the entrance listed the year of founding, 1974, long enough to be institution. Long enough that the word auction didn't carry the transactional quality it carried in less established contexts. Here it was curated. Here it was a selection process, not a sale. The dogs were presented in a wide central hall, each in an individual display pen framed with dark iron and polished wood slats, numbered placards in a serif font, water bowls that matched the iron, a catalog printed on heavy paper, matte finish, the kind you keep and reference, and occasionally leave on a coffee table for a particular effect. The pens were spaced generously, allowing buyers to stand at any one of them without being crowded by the crowd, which was itself an architectural decision about who this event was for. About 60 people had gathered for the Saturday afternoon preview. Some had come for the 6-month-old Belgian Malinois, with working dog lineage going back 4 generations in Europe, which the catalog described with the reverent economy of something worth describing carefully. Others were here for a pair of Borzoi that had already generated a quiet bidding war, conducted entirely by text message, which their handlers knew about and had used to adjust their affect to something appropriately neutral. A few had come to be seen coming. Several of the attendees knew each other, which made the room feel like an extension of some other earlier room, a club meeting or a charity dinner or a gathering in which the social architecture had already been established, and today was merely another occasion to inhabit it. About 60 people had gathered. None of them expected to be surprised. Thomas Calloway stood near the entrance with his daughter, Nora. He was wearing dark jeans, clean but unremarkable, and a gray canvas jacket that had been washed enough times that the cuffs were softening at the edges. He was 38, or looked at the kind of face that had been handsome and still was, but with new lines around the eyes that came from years of doing 2 things at once. He carried nothing, no catalog, no phone in his hand. Nora was 7. She wore a blue corduroy jacket with wooden buttons, and her dark hair was pulled into 2 slightly uneven braids, the kind that suggested a father had done them. She stood close to Thomas, not hiding, just anchored. Her hands were loose at her sides. Her eyes moved slowly through the room, taking things in the way a child does when she's learned that moving slowly is safer than moving quickly. She was deaf, not hard of hearing, not partially, profoundly deaf since birth. She communicated in American Sign Language, which Thomas had spent 3 years learning well enough to have real conversations, and which Nora had been fluent in before she could walk. When they moved through the entrance and into the main hall, a few heads turned. Not all of them. Not in an obvious way, but they turned. A woman in a cream-colored blazer glanced over from where she stood, with a handler near the Borzoi pen. Her gaze moved from Thomas to his jacket to Nora, and back again. And then she looked away, not rudely. Just the way people look away when they've confirmed something they suspected. A man in a sport coat near the bar said something low to the man beside him. The second man looked. Neither of them said anything else. Thomas noticed. He always noticed. He had spent 7 years learning to notice things in rooms whose posture changed when they entered, which conversations slowed without pausing. He had learned to notice the way you learn anything important, out of necessity, and then out of preference, and finally out of something like reflex. He said nothing. He put his hand out, palm up, between himself and Nora. She took it. not out of fear. More the way you reach for someone when you want company without needing rescue. They walked toward the first pen, 3 weeks before the auction, on a Tuesday evening after Nora had gone to bed. Thomas had sat at the kitchen table, with a legal pad, and a glass of water, and written at the top, "What does she actually need?" He had crossed out the word need and written want. Then he crossed that out too, and wrote need again. It was 11:30 at night. The kitchen had the particular stillness of rooms after children have left them, the slight disorder of a cleared-away dinner. The drawings on the refrigerator held by magnets, shaped like fruits. The second glass of water Nora always asked for before bed, and usually left unfinished on the counter. He looked at the glass, still there, half full. The same half it had been when she'd left it. He thought about her very precisely. The way he'd learned to think about problems. Nora had started second grade in September at Whitmore Elementary, which had a small but functional deaf education program, and 2 other deaf students in the school, both older. She had a sign language interpreter named Claire who was good at her job, who had been doing this for 11 years, and had the easy fluency of someone who thinks in both languages simultaneously, and who was genuinely fond of Nora, in the uncomplicated way of someone who likes children, without needing them to be anything other than what they are. This helped. Her academic performance was fine. Her test scores were fine. Her teacher, a woman named Miss Hartley, who had asked Thomas on the first day of school what Nora's preferred signs were and had clearly gone home and practiced them, sent home positive notes every 2 weeks. Fine. 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 But in October she had stopped eating lunch with other children. Thomas had found out not from the school, but from Nora herself, on a Friday afternoon, when they were making soup butternut squash, her choice, and he had asked, casually, the way parents ask things they are not quite casual about. "How was lunch today?" She'd shrugged. He'd said, "Who did you sit with?" And she had answered, signing small and near her chest in the way she did when something was tender, "By the window, by myself." He hadn't pressed. He'd handed her the wooden spoon and asked her to stir. And he'd stood there for a moment, processing the flat, factual way she'd said it. Not wounded, not complaining, not asking him to fix it, just reporting. The way you report a weather observation. "It rained today. By the window. By myself." The absence of complaint was worse than the complaint would have been. He had thought about the problem the way he thought about all problems, systematically, from multiple angles, looking first for the part that was actually changeable. A friend at school would require another child's parents, and another child's willingness, and a convergence of circumstances he couldn't control or engineer. A social skills group had sounded promising until he visited one, and watched 7 children sit in a circle practicing scripted exchanges. "How are you today?" "I am fine." "Thank you," with the glazed compliance of people, going through motions they understand, are being observed. He had asked Nora once, directly, what would help. She had thought about this for several days. The idea of a dog had come from a book, an old one, a library copy with a cracked spine and a stamped return date that went back 12 years. The kind of book that has been checked out so many times the pages have a different texture than new pages, softened and slightly gray at the edges from the accumulated contact of many hands. She'd been reading it on the couch on a Sunday afternoon, lying on her stomach with her feet in the air, and she had looked up from it without being asked. Just looked up the way people look up from something that has produced a thought, and signed. "I want a friend who doesn't need me to explain things." He had written that on the legal pad too, in a different pen, with a box around it. He had put the legal pad away, and 2 days later he had called Hartwell and Sons and asked to be placed on the list for the Saturday preview. He had not hired a handler or a trainer to select for him. Several people had suggested this, a colleague whose wife showed dogs, a neighbor who had strong opinions about working breeds. Everyone had theories. Everyone had a system. Thomas had decided to come himself. With Nora. And let the thing find her. Because what she needed was not a dog that performed well on an assessment. What she needed was a dog that